Have you ever had a moment where your heart and mind were at odds, and one single decision could change everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world around you? This is the story of Sophia, a humble maid whose split-second decision led to a chain of events that shocked everyone at Harrington Mansion and transformed her life in ways she never imagined. It was a crisp autumn morning when Sophia arrived at Harrington Mansion, the grandest house in the quiet town of Maplewood. She always arrived early before the sun had fully risen, determined to start her day with diligence and care. The mansion stood tall against the sky, its walls made of stone that had withstood centuries of history. Inside, the house was filled with the scent of polished wood and old leather, the floors shining under the weight of generations of opulence. Yet, behind the mansion's grandiose exterior, there were the quiet struggles of those who kept it clean and pristine, like Sophia. Sophia, a middle-aged woman with dark brown hair that she always tied neatly into a bun, was well known for her hard work and humble demeanor. She'd been employed as a maid at the mansion for nearly 10 years, scrubbing, dusting, and tidying up the rooms of the family that lived there. An eccentric, wealthy family led by Mr. Harrington, a businessman with a reputation for being cold and demanding. Sophia had never once questioned the disparity between the wealthy life of the Harringtons and her own modest existence, but she did sometimes wonder if she could ever experience something more, something beyond the walls of her small apartment. On that chilly morning, while dusting the library, a grand room that rarely saw visitors, Sophia noticed something unusual behind a row of dusty bookshelves. Curiosity tugged at her, and she cautiously stepped forward to investigate. She moved a few old books out of the way and found a small white envelope hidden beneath them. It was tucked in a narrow crevice of the bookshelf, almost as if it had been purposely placed there and forgotten. Her heart skipped a beat when she carefully pulled out the envelope, which seemed heavier than it should have been. Inside, she found a single crisp $100 bill. Her fingers trembled as she turned the bill over, examining it, the sunlight from the window catching on its smooth surface. Sophia stared at it in disbelief, the weight of what she was holding heavy in her hands, not just in terms of money, but in terms of the decision she now faced. She had never encountered such a situation before. The money didn't belong to her, but it was so easy to imagine what it could do for her. Perhaps help with her mounting bills, pay for the expensive medicine her aging mother needed, or even allow her to treat herself to something special for once. But she had always lived by a strong moral compass, one instilled by her late mother, who had taught her that honesty and integrity were more valuable than any amount of money. Taking the bill for herself would be easy, but was it the right thing to do? Sophia sat down on a nearby chair in the library, the room's silence almost suffocating. Her thoughts raced. She could keep the bill, no one would ever know, and it would solve so many of her problems. Yet something inside her resisted the temptation. Her conscience nagged at her. This money wasn't hers to take. It was lost, and someone out there might need it just as badly as she did. The bill was meant for someone else, and it was up to her to decide whether to do the right thing. After a few moments of internal debate, Sophia made her decision. She couldn't keep it. Not this time. Not when she knew she had a chance to do something good. Carefully, she folded the bill and tucked it into a small envelope, writing on the front in neat, careful handwriting. Lost and found. She made her way to the mansion staff room, where the lost and found items were kept. As she passed through the halls, she overheard a conversation that caused her to pause. Joan, one of the housekeepers she had worked with for years, was speaking with Ben, a young man who had recently joined the staff. "I just don't know how we're going to make it this month," Joan was saying. "Everything's so expensive, and we barely have enough to cover rent, let alone food or medicine for my kids. Even $100 would be a relief right now." Sophia's heart sank as she listened to Joan's words. She had seen the strain in her co-workers' eyes and knew that many of the other staff members were struggling, just like Joan. The money she had found could change everything for someone like Joan, who worked tirelessly and yet could barely make ends meet. Sophia felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of empathy. What if she used the $100 to help someone in need? She hadn't yet placed the envelope in the lost and found basket, and now a new idea formed in her mind. She would give the money to someone who needed it, someone who wasn't expecting it. It would be an act of kindness that could change their life, just as it had the potential to change hers. Sophia's mind raced as she thought about how she could make it happen. Then it came to her. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly custodian who had worked at the mansion for decades, had recently been struggling with medical bills. He had always been a quiet, kind man, never asking for help, but Sophia had overheard him talking to a nurse one day about his troubles. His health was deteriorating, and his finances were barely enough to cover his daily needs, let alone his treatments. That night, after finishing her shift, Sophia went home and thought long and hard about how she could help. The money wasn't hers to keep, but it could be used to ease someone's burden. She made up her mind. The next morning, before the staff arrived, Sophia took the envelope containing the $100 bill and quietly slipped it under the door of Mr. Jenkins's apartment, with a small note that read, "For you, Mr. Jenkins, may this bring you some comfort in these difficult times. With care, Sophia." She then quietly walked back to the main mansion, a weight lifted off her shoulders. The next day, as word spread about the mysterious act of kindness, the staff began to talk. Whispers filled the hallways as everyone speculated about who had left the money for Mr. Jenkins. The staff was shocked that someone would do something so selfless, especially considering how hard everyone worked to make ends meet. But Sophia, ever humble, kept quiet, content in the knowledge that she had done something good. What happened next, however, took everyone by surprise. A week later, Mr. Harrington, the mansion's owner, called for a meeting with the staff in the grand dining hall. His stern demeanor was softened by a rare smile as he addressed the group. "I've been observing something very important," Mr. Harrington began. "A few days ago, I placed a $100 bill in the mansion to see what would happen. I wanted to test something, not just the honesty of my staff, but the character of the people who work here." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at him, stunned. They had no idea what he was talking about. Mr. Harrington continued, "I have learned that the $100 didn't just disappear. Instead, it sparked an act of kindness. Someone used that money to help Mr. Jenkins, who was in need. What I've seen here is more than just honesty. It's compassion, empathy, and generosity. I believe we should be rewarding these qualities." The room was filled with gasps of disbelief. Many of the staff members exchanged nervous glances, unsure of who had made the decision to help Mr. Jenkins. But Sophia knew, and she was filled with a quiet sense of pride as Mr. Harrington looked her way. "Sophia," Mr. Harrington said, his voice firm but kind, "I want to acknowledge you for your act of kindness. You have shown me that true wealth isn't in material possessions, but in the goodness of the human heart. Because of your actions, we are going to implement a program that rewards acts of kindness, compassion, and generosity in this household." Sophia's heart swelled with pride. She had never expected such recognition, but hearing Mr. Harrington's words made her realize that her small, quiet decision had ripple effects far beyond what she could have imagined. The other staff members, many of whom were struggling, looked at her with newfound admiration and respect. From that moment on, the atmosphere at the mansion shifted. Staff members began to support one another more openly, sharing their struggles and their triumphs. The environment was no longer one of rigid hierarchy, but of compassion and understanding. Sophia had sparked a transformation, not just within herself, but within the entire staff of Harrington Mansion. Sophia's simple decision, to return a lost $100 bill, had set into motion a wave of change that no one, not even she, could have foreseen. It reminded everyone that kindness, honesty, and empathy are worth more than any material possession. And sometimes the greatest treasures in life aren't things that can be bought, but the selfless acts that leave a lasting impact on those around us. The mansion, with all its wealth and grandeur, would never be the same, and neither would Sophia.